My name is Amelia, and the day I realized I didn't belong in my own grandson's life wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, almost polite, and somehow that made it worse. Can you make sure she's not in the shot? I heard him say it casually, like he was asking to adjust lighting. For a second, I thought I misunderstood. The campus was full of noise, laughter, applause, camera shutters clicking nonstop, but those words cut through everything like a blade. She kind of ruins the aesthetic. I froze. The photographer hesitated, glancing between us. I was standing just a step behind my grandson, dressed in my best navy dress, the one I'd carefully ironed the night before. My hands tightened around my purse, fingers trembling slightly. "Do you want her out of the frame?" the photographer asked carefully. My grandson, Ethan, finally looked at me. Not with guilt, not with warmth, just mild irritation, like I had become an inconvenience. "It's fine," he said quickly. "We'll take some with her, then some without. With her. Not with my grandmother. Not with Amelia. Just with her." I forced a small smile. "Whatever you prefer, sweetheart." Sweetheart. The word felt unfamiliar in my own mouth. The sun was too bright, the air too thick. Families gathered all around us, hugging, crying, celebrating. Parents lifting their children into the air, grandparents wiping tears of pride. And there I was, trying not to fall apart. The camera flashed. Click. Another photo. Click. Each picture captured a moment that meant everything to everyone else, and somehow nothing to me anymore. "All right, now just the graduate," the photographer said. Ethan stepped away instantly.
No hesitación.
No glance back. Like stepping away from me was the most natural thing in the world. I nodded and moved aside, pretending I needed space. Pretending I wasn't being quietly removed. I found a bench under a tall maple tree and sat down slowly. My knees ached, but I barely noticed. From a distance, I watched him laugh with his friends. He looked perfect, confident,
Polished.
like he belonged to a world I was never invited into. A girl wrapped her arm around him, tall, elegant, expensive-looking. He leaned into her easily, like that was his life now. And maybe it was. I pressed a tissue to my eyes before the tears could fully fall. Funny how memories choose moments like this to return. I saw him again. Not the young man laughing in front of me, but the boy he used to be, 12 years old, standing in a hospital hallway, broken. That day still lives inside me. The smell of antiseptic, the quiet voices, the doctor's face, and Ethan clutching my hand like he would disappear if he let go. "They're gone," he had whispered. I knelt in front of him, pulling him close. "You still have me," I told him. "I'm not going anywhere." And I meant it.
God, I meant it.
From that moment, my life stopped being mine. I rearranged everything for him. I cut my working hours so I could be home after school. I learned how to cook the meals he liked, even the ones I didn't understand. I stayed awake through nights when grief shook him awake, holding him until he fell asleep again. When he got older, things changed slowly, then all at once. First, it was small. "Can you drop me off a block away?" Then it was the house. Then the car. Then me. Nothing about my life was ever quite enough anymore. But I kept going. Because love doesn't keep score. Or, at least, that's what I believed. When he got accepted into one of the most prestigious universities in the state, I didn't hesitate. I sold my home. 42 years of memories.
Gone.
I moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city. 1 bedroom. Thin walls. No garden. I told myself it didn't matter. Because his future mattered more. I picked up extra work. Long shifts that left my joints aching so badly, I sometimes cried in silence at night. I stopped buying things for myself.
Stop going out.
Stopped being anyone other than his support. And now, I was the woman who ruined his photos. I let out a quiet breath and looked back toward the crowd. Ethan threw his head back laughing at something someone said. He didn't look toward me once. Not once. Later, at his apartment, I stood alone in the bathroom, staring at my reflection. When had I become this invisible? The wrinkles, the tired eyes, the way I held myself smaller, like I didn't want to take up space. I splashed cold water on my face. He doesn't mean it, I whispered to myself. He's young. But the words felt weak, because deep down, something inside me had already shifted. A quiet question, one I had avoided for years, finally rose to the surface. What if he does mean it? What if this is who he is now? And more frightening than that, what if I allowed it? I dried my hands slowly and stood there longer than necessary. Outside, I could hear laughter, music, life moving forward. But inside me something had stopped. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure what came next. That night, I couldn't sleep.
The guest room felt чужим, холодным, будто я просто случайный человек, который зашел переночевать, а не тот, кто отдал годы своей жизни ради этого дома, этой жизни, этого человека.
I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to distant laughter from the living room where Ethan and his friends were still celebrating, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel tired. I felt awake in a way that was almost painful, like my mind had finally stopped protecting me from the truth. I kept replaying that moment in my head, his voice, casual, dismissive, almost bored. She ruins the aesthetic, and no matter how many times I tried to soften it, to excuse it, to reshape it into something harmless, it always returned sharp and clear, exactly as it was. The next morning, I woke early out of habit. My body still followed the routine I had built over the years. Wake up, prepare, take care of things before anyone else needed anything. Except now, no one needed me. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, letting that realization settle slowly. It was strange. For so long, my entire identity had been tied to being needed. Without it, I didn't quite know who I was supposed to be. When I walked into the kitchen, Ethan was already there, casually flipping pancakes like nothing had happened. He wore silk pajamas, something new, something expensive. I had never seen them before. "Morning," he said, not even turning fully toward me. "Coffee's fresh." I poured myself a cup, my hands steady, though inside I still felt fragile, like glass that had already cracked but hadn't shattered yet. Around the table sat two of his friends, and that girl from yesterday, her name, I remembered now, was Chloe. She glanced at me briefly, polite but distant, like I was part of the furniture rather than a person. They were talking about plans for the weekend, a lake house, a trip, something spontaneous and carefree. A life that had no place for someone like me. I stood there holding my cup, waiting for a pause, for a moment where I could speak without interrupting. "I thought maybe we could have lunch together before I leave," I finally said. My voice sounded softer than I intended. Ethan didn't even look up right away. "Can't today," he replied. "We've got plans."
Just like that. No hesitation.
No thought. I nodded, pretending it didn't matter. Pretending I hadn't been holding on to that small hope all morning. As I packed my things later, I moved slowly, carefully folding each item like it mattered more than it did. In reality, I was delaying, waiting. Maybe he would come in. Maybe he would say something, anything, that sounded like the boy I once knew. But he didn't. Instead, I heard his voice from the living room again, this time lower, but not low enough. "Yeah, she's, old school. Still thinks life works like it used to." Laughter followed. Quiet, but unmistakable. Old school. I paused, my hand resting on the zipper of my bag. That word stayed with me longer than it should have. Not because it was cruel, but because it was accurate. I had been living in a version of the world that no longer existed. A world where sacrifice meant something. Where love was visible. Where giving everything to someone meant they would at least see you. But Ethan didn't live in that world. And maybe he never had. When I stepped into the living room to say goodbye, the energy didn't shift. No one stopped. No one made space. I existed at the edge of everything, like background noise. "I'm leaving," I said. Ethan walked over, gave me a quick hug, the kind you give out of habit, not feeling. Drive safe, he said. Text me when you get home. I held on to him for just a second longer than he expected. Not enough for him to notice, but enough for me to understand something clearly. This was the last time I would hold on to him like that. The drive home was quiet. No music. Just the sound of the road, and my thoughts finally catching up to me. I didn't cry right away. That came later. At first, there was just clarity, a slow, steady realization that spread through me like cold water. I had built my entire life around someone who had outgrown me. And worse, I had allowed myself to disappear in the process. When I arrived at my apartment, everything was exactly as I had left it. Small, quiet, unremarkable. I placed my keys on the table and stood there for a moment, looking around like I was seeing it for the first time. This wasn't just a place I lived. It was the result of every choice I had made, every sacrifice, every compromise. And yet, there was almost nothing of me in it.
No color. No personality.
No signs of a life actually lived. Just survival. I sank into the chair by the window and finally let the tears come. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady and quiet, like something that had been waiting a long time. I cried for the years I had given without question, for the moments I had ignored my own needs, for the version of myself I had slowly erased. But most of all, I cried because I finally understood something I had been avoiding for years. Love, when given without limits, can become invisible. And I had made myself invisible. The phone rang sometime later, pulling me out of that heavy silence. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Amelia? The voice on the other end was familiar.
Warm.
Grounding. It was Laura, an old colleague from the hospital. You sound off. Are you okay? For a moment, I considered lying, saying I was fine, keeping everything neatly contained like I always had. But I was tired, too tired to pretend. No, I said quietly. I'm not. There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just present. I'm coming over, she said simply. Don't argue. And for once, I didn't. As I hung up the phone, I looked around my apartment again. But this time, something felt different. Not better.
Not yet, but honest.
For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what Ethan needed. I was thinking about what I had lost. And maybe what I could still find. 3 months passed before I saw Ethan again, and in that time, something inside me quietly rebuilt itself without asking for permission. I didn't become a different person overnight, but I stopped waiting. That was the first change. I stopped checking my phone every morning hoping for a message. I stopped replaying that graduation day in my mind like a broken recording. Instead, I started filling my days with small, unfamiliar things that didn't revolve around him. I joined a book group, though at first I barely spoke. I walked in the park with my camera, awkwardly learning how to use it again, capturing strangers instead of memories. I rearranged my apartment not because it needed it, but because I did. Slowly, the space began to look like it belonged to me, not like a temporary stop in someone else's story. And the strangest part? The world didn't end when I stopped centering my life around Ethan. It kept going. So did I. That morning in September was cool, the kind of morning that feels like a quiet reset. I had just made coffee and was sitting by the window, reviewing photos I had taken the day before, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a brief second, I thought about ignoring it. I had grown used to my own rhythm, my own quiet. But something instinct maybe made me stand up and walk to the door. When I looked through the peephole, my breath caught.
Ethan.
I opened the door slowly, unsure if I was ready for whatever version of him stood on the other side. He looked different, not polished, not confident. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unstyled, dark circles under his eyes. He looked younger somehow, stripped of whatever had made him feel untouchable just months ago. Hi, he said, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. I didn't answer right away. I just stepped aside. He walked in slowly, glancing around like he had entered a place he didn't recognize. Which, in a way, he had. This wasn't the apartment he had ignored before. This was something new. Something I had built without him. It looks nice, he said, his eyes landing on the photos on the wall. Thank you, I replied calmly. Do you want coffee? He nodded and sat down, his posture uncertain, almost hesitant. I went into the kitchen, giving myself a moment to breathe. My heart was beating faster than I wanted to admit, but it wasn't the same feeling as before. It wasn't fear of losing him. It was something steadier, something controlled. When I came back, I handed him a mug. He held it with both hands, staring into it like he was trying to gather courage. I lost the job, he said suddenly. I sat down across from him. The one you interviewed for? He nodded. Didn't even make it past the first round. There was a pause. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. What about your girlfriend? I asked, choosing the word carefully. He let out a short, humorless laugh. She's gone. I didn't react immediately. I just waited. She said I wasn't stable enough, he continued. That she needed someone with direction. He swallowed. I guess I was only impressive when things looked good on paper. That sentence stayed in the air between us longer than anything else he said. And now? I asked. He shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. I've been applying everywhere. Nothing. Rent's going up next month. I can't afford it. He finally looked at me. I didn't know where else to go. There it was. Not wrapped in politeness. Not hidden. The truth. I leaned back slightly, studying him. Not as the boy I raised, but as the person in front of me. Why me? I asked quietly. He blinked, surprised. What do you mean? You have friends, connections, people you chose over me. My voice was calm, not accusing, just honest. Why come here? He looked down again, his fingers tightening around the mug. They're not answering anymore, he admitted. I guess they weren't really my friends. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't heavy this time. It was clear. You're the only one who didn't leave, he added softly. Something inside me reacted to that. A familiar pull. The old instinct to fix, to give, to sacrifice. But this time I didn't move immediately. I let the moment sit. I'll help you, I said finally. Relief flashed across his face, so quickly it almost hurt to see. Thank you, Grandma, But not like before. He stopped. What do you mean? He asked cautiously. I continued, choosing my words carefully. You're not moving in here, and I'm not giving you money. His expression changed instantly. Disappointment. Then frustration. I knew it, he muttered, starting to stand. Sit down. He hesitated, but then he did. I'm not finished, I said. I will help you find a job. I will help you figure things out. I will support you, but not at the cost of myself. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. You've never said no before, he said. I know. And now you are? Yes. The word felt stronger than I expected. He looked away, jaw tightening. I didn't come here for a lecture. No, I said calmly. You came here because you needed something. And I'm offering you help. Just not the kind you're used to. There was a long pause. Then, quietly, he said, I messed up, didn't I? I didn't rush to comfort him. Yes, I said simply. That answer seemed to hit harder than anything else. He nodded slowly, as if accepting something for the first time. I didn't see you, he said after a moment. Not really. I felt that, deep. No, irraplia. You didn't. Another silence, but this one was different. Not empty, not tense, just real. For the first time in years, we were speaking without roles. Not grandmother and grandson. Just two people. I don't expect you to fix everything, he added. I just didn't know where else to go. I nodded slightly. Then we start from there, I said. Not with sacrifice. Not with guilt. But with something we had never really had before. Boundaries. and maybe something new could grow from that. The first few weeks after Ethan came back into my life were the most delicate, not because anything dramatic happened, but because everything could have easily slipped back into what it used to be. Patterns don't disappear just because we recognize them. They wait, quietly, patiently. And I knew if I wasn't careful, I would fall right back into being everything for him again, and he would fall right back into taking it without noticing. So I stayed aware. Not cold, not distant, but aware in a way I had never allowed myself to be before. Ethan didn't move in, and that was the first real boundary I held. Instead, I helped him find a room in a shared apartment across town. Small, slightly worn, but affordable. I remember the look on his face the first time we saw it. It wasn't disgust exactly, but it wasn't comfort either. It was adjustment. Reality settling in. "It's okay," he said, trying to convince himself more than me. I didn't soften it. "It's what you can afford right now," I replied gently. "And that's enough." He nodded, slowly. That was the beginning. Not glamorous. Not impressive. But real. He started applying for jobs differently after that. Not chasing titles or prestige. Not trying to match the image he had built in his head, but looking at what was actually available. I sat with him one afternoon at my kitchen table, helping him rewrite his resume. Not doing it for him, just guiding. Every time he tried to hand control over to me, I handed it right back. "You do it," I would say. "I'll help if you get stuck." At first, it frustrated him. I could see it in the way he sighed, the way he rubbed his forehead, the way he muttered under his breath when things didn't come easily. He wasn't used to struggling without being rescued. But slowly something shifted. He stopped asking me to take over. He started asking how to do things instead. A week later, he got an interview at a small logistics company. Nothing impressive. Nothing he would have considered even remotely acceptable a few months ago. When he told me, he tried to sound neutral about it, but I could hear the uncertainty underneath. "It's not really what I planned," he said. "Plans change," I replied. "What matters is what you do next." He didn't argue this time. He just nodded. The night before his interview, he called me, not to ask for money, not to ask me to fix anything, but just to talk. "What if I mess it up?" he asked. I leaned back in my chair, thinking carefully before answering. "Then you learn something," I said. "And you try again." There was a pause. "That's it?" he asked. I smiled slightly. "That's it." I could almost hear him processing that.
No dramatic reassurance.
No promise to catch him if he fell. Just truth. He got the job. When he told me, his voice carried something I hadn't heard in years. Not pride exactly, but something close to it. Earned, not given. "It's not a big deal," he said quickly, almost as if he didn't want to make it sound important. "It is," I said simply. "Because you did it." That mattered. More than the position. More than the salary. He had taken a step without leaning on me to carry him there. Our relationship began to change in ways I didn't expect. We started having dinner together once a week, not out of obligation, not because he needed something, but because we both chose to. He would come over, sometimes tired, sometimes distracted, but present in a way he hadn't been before. We cooked together occasionally, and I noticed small things. The way he asked questions. The way he listened. The way he no longer rushed through conversations like they were interruptions. One evening, as we were cutting vegetables side by side, he said quietly, "I didn't realize how much you did for me." I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't hear him, but because I didn't want to turn that moment into something heavy. "You weren't supposed to," I said calmly. "You were a child." He shook his head slightly. "Not later," he said. Later, I should have seen it. That was different. That was awareness. I didn't rush to forgive him in that moment. Not because I didn't want to, but because I understood something now that I hadn't before. Forgiveness isn't about words. It's about change. And he was changing. Slowly. Imperfectly. But genuinely. Meanwhile, my life continued expanding in ways I hadn't imagined. I signed up for a photography workshop, something I would have never allowed myself to do before. The cost made me hesitate for a moment, out of habit, but then I reminded myself, I wasn't taking anything away from anyone anymore. This was mine. I started going out more. Not in big, dramatic ways, but enough to feel like I existed outside of my past. I reconnected with people I had drifted away from. I laughed more easily. I noticed things again. Small things. Light through windows. The way strangers interacted. The quiet details I had missed when my entire world was focused on one person. Ethan noticed too. "You seem different," he said one night as we sat with tea in the living room. "I am," I replied. He looked around at the photos on the wall, the books, the small changes that had transformed the space. "You seem happy," he added, almost uncertain. I considered that. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." That answer seemed to affect him more than I expected. Not in a negative way, but in a reflective one. Like he was trying to understand something he hadn't thought about before. "Did I take that away from you?" he asked quietly. I met his eyes. "You didn't take it," I said. "I gave it away." That truth settled between us, heavy but necessary. He nodded slowly, accepting it. "I don't want to be that person anymore," he said after a moment. "Then don't be," I replied. It sounded simple, but we both knew it wasn't. Change never is. Over the next few weeks, I saw him try in ways that mattered. Not grand gestures, not dramatic apologies repeated over and over, but consistent effort. He showed up. He followed through. He stopped expecting things without giving anything back. And most importantly, he started seeing me, not as someone in the background, not as support, but as a person. One evening, as he was leaving, he paused at the door. "I'm glad you didn't let me move in," he said. I raised an eyebrow slightly. "You didn't feel that way at the time." He smiled faintly. "I know, but I needed to figure things out on my own." I nodded. "Yes," I said. "You did." After he left, I sat alone for a while, not in loneliness, but in quiet reflection. The room felt full, not empty. My life felt full, not dependent. And for the first time in years, I understood something clearly. Loving someone doesn't mean carrying them. Sometimes, it means letting them learn how to stand. A year ago, I stood in a crowded university courtyard and felt myself disappear. Today, I stood in front of a mirror, adjusting a light blue dress I had bought for myself. Not because I needed it, not because someone expected me to look a certain way, but simply because I liked it. That alone still felt new. There was a quiet confidence in the way I moved now, in the way I looked at myself. I wasn't trying to hide the years anymore. I wasn't trying to make myself smaller. I had spent too long doing that. And strangely, the world didn't feel harsher when I stopped shrinking. It felt clearer. My apartment no longer looked like a temporary place. It looked like a life. My photographs filled the walls, each one capturing something I had learned to notice again: light, emotion, presence. The balcony plants had grown fuller. The bookshelves were no longer empty. Everything around me reflected something I had slowly rebuilt: myself. Ethan was coming over that evening. Not because he needed something, not because he had nowhere else to go, but because we had made plans. That difference mattered more than I could explain. He had been working steadily for months now. The job that once seemed not good enough had become something he took seriously. He had learned discipline in ways no lecture or expensive education had ever taught him. He paid his rent, managed his expenses, cooked his own meals, sometimes badly, sometimes surprisingly well. And every so often he would call me, not for help but just to talk. About work, about life, about things that didn't revolve around crisis. When the doorbell rang, I didn't feel that old rush of anxiety anymore. I opened the door calmly. He stood there holding a small paper bag. "Hey," he said. Raplia, stepping asida." He walked in, looking around with a soft familiarity that hadn't been there before. This wasn't a place he ignored anymore. It was a place he respected. "I brought dessert," he said, lifting the bag slightly. I smiled. You didn't have to. I know, he answered. I wanted to. That was new too. We moved easily into the evening, cooking together, talking without effort, without tension. There were still moments of silence, but they weren't empty. They were comfortable.
Real.
At one point, he picked up one of my framed photographs, the same one he had noticed months ago, the elderly couple on the bench. I keep thinking about this one, he said.
Why?
I asked. He studied it for a moment before answering. Because they look like they see each other. Completely. I nodded slowly. That's rare, I said. He looked at me then, more directly than before. I didn't see you, he said quietly. There it was again, but this time it felt different. Not like guilt. Not like obligation. Like understanding.
No, irreplaceably.
You didn't. He didn't look away this time. I thought I knew what mattered, he continued. Status. Image. Being around the right people. But none of it stayed. The second things stopped going well, it all disappeared. He paused. You didn't. I listened, not interrupting. You were always there, he said. And I treated you like you didn't matter. His voice didn't break. It didn't need to. The weight of what he was saying was enough. I set my cup down slowly. Ethan, I said, you were young, but you were also old enough to make choices. And you made them. He nodded. I know. There was no defensiveness left in him. That was the difference. I'm not saying this to hurt you, I continued. I'm saying it because it's true. And because if you don't face that truth, nothing really changes. I understand, he said quietly. We sat there for a moment, the past and present meeting in a way that felt complete. I used to think love meant giving everything, I added after a pause.
No limits. No boundaries.
I thought that was what made it real. And now, he asked, now I know that love without respect isn't love at all, I said. And giving everything to someone who doesn't see you doesn't make you generous. It makes you invisible. That word lingered. Invisible. He exhaled slowly. I made you feel that way, he said. Yes, I answered. There was no point softening it. But you don't anymore. That mattered too. He looked up, surprised slightly. I don't. No, I said. Because I stopped allowing it. That was the truth I had learned. He leaned back slightly, absorbing that. I think I needed to lose everything to understand that, he said. To see what was actually real. Sometimes that's the only way, I replied. We finished dinner and later moved to the balcony. The evening air was cool, calm. The city sounded distant, like it wasn't rushing for once. I picked up my camera and adjusted the settings out of habit. You're really serious about this now, he said, watching me. I am, I replied. Are you still going on that photography trip? He asked. I smiled slightly. I already booked it. His face lit up, not exaggerated, not performative, just genuine. That's amazing, he said. You should. I am, I answered. He nodded, then hesitated slightly before speaking again. I'm proud of you, he said. That caught me off guard more than I expected. Thank you, I said softly. And for the first time, it didn't feel like something I had to earn. It just felt received. When he stood to leave later that night, he didn't rush. He didn't check his phone. He stayed present until the very end. At the door, he paused. I know I can't undo everything, he said.
No, irreplaceable.
But I want to do better. Not just say it. I looked at him, really looked at him. And this time, I saw both versions of him. The boy I raised, and the man he was becoming. Then do that, I said. I will. He stepped forward and hugged me. This time, it wasn't automatic. It wasn't brief. It wasn't empty. It meant something. After he left, I didn't feel that old emptiness anymore. I didn't feel like something had been taken from me. I felt steady. I walked back inside, turned off the lights, and paused for a moment near the wall of photographs. My life captured in pieces. Moments I had chosen. Moments that belonged to me. A year ago, I thought my story had ended in that courtyard, that I had been reduced to the old woman in the background. But I was wrong. That wasn't the end. That was the moment I finally began to see myself again. And once you learn to see yourself, you never become invisible again.